So we'll continue with 4.27. Nati prasida dridaya sarvasvatayastadeshu so vitarkayan vivittasta idam chovacha dharma ved. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Lord.
Hare Krishna, Dharma Prabhu. Translation. Thus the sage, being dissatisfied and hurt, at once began to reflect because he knew the essence of religion, and he said within himself, Purport, the sage began to search out the cause of not being satisfied and hurt. Perfection is never attained until one is satisfied at heart. This satisfaction of heart has to be searched out beyond matter. Hare Krishna.
28. धृतव्रतेन भीमाया छन्दांसि गुरवो नया मानिता निर्व्यालिकेन गृहीतं चानुशासनं भारतव्यपदेशेन हि अमनायतश्च प्रदर्शिता दृश्यते यत्र धर्मादि स्त्रीशूद्रादिभिरपि कुतः. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Anita Mati.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have under strict disciplinary vows unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual master and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the impact of disciplinic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Sudras, and others can see the path of religion. Purport. No one can understand the import of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow and disciplinic succession. The Vedas, spiritual masters, and sacrificial fire must be worshipped by the desiring candidate. All these intricacies of Vedic knowledge are systematically presented in the Mahabharata for understanding of the woman class, the laborer class, and the unqualified members of Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya families. In this age, the Mahabharata is more essential than the original Vedas. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
4.30. Tatapi bhatame dhaihyo hi atma chaivatma vibhu asampanna viva bhati brahma varchasya satamaha. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sapan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I am feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas. Undoubtedly, Srila Vyasaveda was complete in all details of Vedic achievements. Purification of the living being submerged in matter is made possible by prescribed activities in the Vedas, but the ultimate achievement is different. Unless it is attained, the living being, even though fully equipped, cannot be situated in the transcendentally normal stage. Srila Vyasadeva appeared to have lost the clue and therefore felt dissatisfaction.
31. Kimva Bhagavata Dharma na prayena nirupita priya paramahamsanam ta eva hi achyuta priya. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Nalla Mata.
Hare Krishna. Translation. This may be because I did not specifically point out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to perfect beings and the infallible Lord. Purport. The dissatisfaction which was being felt by Srila Vyasadeva is expressed herein in his own words. This was felt by the normal condition of the living being in devotional service of the Lord. Unless one is fixed in normal condition of service, neither the Lord nor the living being can be fully satisfied. This defect was felt by him when Narad Muni, his spiritual master, reached him. It is described as follows. Hare Krishna.
Tasyevam kiram atmanam manyamanasya kidayat krishnasya naradopa abhyagan ashramam pragudahatam Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sakshi Mataji. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu. Sakshi Mataji, please.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
As mentioned before, Narada reached the cottage of Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa on the banks of the Saraswati, just as Vyasadeva was regretting his defects. Purport. The vacuum felt by Vyasadeva was not due to his lack of knowledge. Bhagavata Dharma is purely devotional service of the Lord, to which the monist has no access. The monist is not counted among the Paramahamsas, the most perfect of the renounced order of life. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of narrations of transcendental activities of personality of Godhead. Although Vyasadeva was an empowered divinity, he still felt dissatisfaction because in one of his works where the transcendental activities of the Lord properly, in none of his works where the transcendental activities of the Lord were properly explained. The inspiration was infused by Sri Krishna directly in the heart of Vyasadeva, and thus he felt the vacuum as explained above. It is definitely expressed herewith that without the transcendental loving service of the Lord, everything is void. But in the transcendental service of the Lord, everything is tangible without any separate attempt at fruitive work or empiric philosophical speculation.
33. Tam abhignaya sahasa pratyuttaya gatam mani pujayam asa vidivan Naradam Surapujitam. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sarasya Mani.
Hare Krishna. At the auspicious arrival of Sri Narada, Sri Vyasadeva got up respectfully and worshipped him, giving him veneration equal to that given to Brahma Ji, the creator. Purport. Vidhi means Brahma, the first created living being. He is the original student as well as professor of the Vedas. He learned it from Sri Krishna and taught Narada first. So Narada is the second Acharya in the line of spiritual disciplic succession. He is a representative of Brahma and therefore he is respected exactly like Brahma, the father of all Vidhis, regulations. Similarly, all other successive disciples in the chain are also equally respected as representatives of the original spiritual master. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Appearance of Sri Narada. Hare Krishna.
We are starting the fifth chapter, Narada's instruction of Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. 151. Tutam vacha atatam sukham asina vasinam prakchavaha devarshi para praha viprashim vinapani smayan iva. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sagar Prabhu.
Translation. Sutta Goswami said, thus the sage amongst the gods, Narada, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, addressed the Rishi amongst the Brahmanas, Vedavyasa. Purport. Narada was smiling because he well knew the great sage Vedavyasa and the cause of his disappointment. As he will explain gradually, Vyasadeva's disappointment was due to insufficiency in presenting the signs of devotional service. Narada knew the defect and it was confirmed by the position of Vyasa.
5.2. Naradam vacha parasaraya mahabhaga bhavata kachit atmana parityushyati sarira atma manasa eva va. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Translation. Addressing Vyasadeva, the son of Parasara, Narada inquired, are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization? Purport. This was hinted by Narada to Vedavyasa regarding the cause of his despondency. Vyasadeva, as the descendant of Parasara, a greatly powerful sage, had the privilege of having a great parentage which should not have given Vyasadeva cause of dependency. Being a great son of great father, he should not have identified the self with the body or the mind. Ordinary men with a poor fund of knowledge can identify the body as self or the mind as self, but Vyasadeva should not have done so. One cannot be cheerful by nature unless one is factually seated in self-realization, which is transcendental to the material body and mind. Hare Krishna.
5.3 Jignasitam susampannam api te mahat adbhutam kritavan bharataram yastavam sarvatra paribramitham. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yogesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Translation. Your inquiries were full and your studies were also well fulfilled, and there is no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences elaborately explained. Purport. The despondency of Vyasadeva was certainly not due to his lack of sufficient knowledge, because as a student he had fully inquired about the Vedic literatures, as a result of which the Mahabharata is compiled with full explanation of the Vedas.
5.4
Hare Krishna.
Jignasitam aditam cha brahma yattat sanatanam tatapi sochasi atmanam akritartha iva prabho. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Pushkala.
Hare Krishna, am I audible?
Yeah.
Translation. You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu? Purport. The Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra compiled by Sri Vyasadeva is the full deliberation of the impersonal absolute feature, and it is accepted as the most exalted philosophical exposition in the world. It covers the subject of eternity and the methods are scholarly, so there cannot be any doubt about the transcendental scholarship of Vyasadeva. So why should he lament? Hare Krishna.
5.5 Vyasa vacha asti eva me sarvamidam tvayuktam tatapi natma paritushyate me tanmulam avyaktam agada bodham prachamahe tatpatam bhavatma bhutam. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Sri Gopal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Shri Vyasadeva said, all you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. For you are a man of unlimited knowledge, due to your being the offspring of one, Brahma, who is self-born, without mundane father and mother. Purport. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying with the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind. And that is the root cause of all despondencies. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narada to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Why Narada should be approached is explained below.
5.6 Tave bhavan veda samasta guhyam upasito yat purusha purana paravarsvaresho manasaiva vishwam sujati avati ati gunair asanga. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Saban Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My Lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. A person who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord is the emblem of all knowledge. Such a devotee of the Lord in full perfection of devotional service is also perfect by the qualification of personality of Godhead. As such, the eightfold perfections of mystic power, Ashtasiddhi, constitute very little of his godly opulence. A devotee like Narada can act wonderfully by his spiritual perfection, which every individual is trying to attain. Srila Narada is a cent percent perfect living being, although not equal to the personality of God. Hare Krishna.
Tam paryatan arka eva itrilokam antascharo vayur ivatma sakshi paravre brahmani dharmato vritha snatasya me nyunam alam vichakshva. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, love Vishnu.
Hare Krishna. Translation: Like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds, and like the air, you can penetrate the internal regions of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive supersoul. Please therefore find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence under disciplinary regulation and laws. Purport: Transcendental realization, pious activities, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, non-violence, and studying the scriptures under strict disciplinary regulations are always helpful. Hare Krishna.
Sri Naradam Vacha Bhavatanudita Prayam Yasho Bhagavato Amadam Yene Vaso Natushyata Manaye Tat Darshanam Kilam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Sri Narada said, "You have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless." Purport: The eternal relation of an individual soul with the Supreme Soul Personality of Godhead is constitutionally one of the being the eternal servitor of the eternal Master. The Lord has expanded himself as living beings in order to accept loving service from them, and this alone can satisfy both the Lord and the living beings. Such a scholar as Vyasadeva has completed many expansions of the Vedic literatures, ending with the Vedanta philosophy, but none of them have been written directly glorifying the personality of Godhead. Dry philosophical speculations, even on the transcendental subject of the Absolute, have very little attraction without directly dealing with the glorification of the Lord. The personality of Godhead is the last word in transcendental realization. The Absolute, realized as impersonal Brahman or localized Super Soul, Paramatma, is less productive of transcendental bliss than the supreme personal realization of his glories. The compiler of... Okay. Shall I continue, Prabhu?
Yeah, please.
The compiler of the Vedanta Darshan is Vyasadeva himself, yet he is troubled, although he is the author. So what sort of transcendental bliss can be derived by the readers and listeners of Vedanta, which is not explained directly by Vyasadeva, the author? Herein arises the necessity of explaining Vedanta Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam by the self-same author. Hare Krishna.
Yata dharmadaya sarta muni varyan kirtita na tata vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnina. Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Translation. All the great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with the religious performances. You have not described the glories of Supreme Personality Vasudeva. Purport: The prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. The root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of Puranas. He has certainly, as a matter of course, given descriptions of the glories of Lord Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. These 4 items are far inferior to engagement in devotional service of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva, as authorized scholar, knew very well this difference. And still, instead of giving more importance to the better type of engagement, namely devotional service to the Lord, he had more or less improperly used his valuable time, and thus he was despondent. From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in devotional service to the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is clearly mentioned.
Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji.
After liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, etc., one is engaged in pure devotional service. This is called the stage of self-realization or the Brahma-bhuta stage. After attainment of this Brahma-bhuta stage, one is satisfied, but satisfaction is the beginning of transcendental bliss. One should progress by attaining neutrality and equality in the relative world. And passing this stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the instruction of the personality of Godhead in Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion is that in order to maintain the status quo of the maintain the status quo of the Brahma-bhuta stage, as also to increase the degree of transcendental realization, Narada recommended to Vyasadeva that he, Vyasadeva, should now eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. This could cure him from gross despondence. Hare Krishna.
5.10. Na yad vachaschitram padam hareryaso jagat pavitram pragritnita karhichit tadvayasam tirtam ushanti manasa na yatra hamsa niramanti usikashya. Hare translation and purport by His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Okay. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. Purport. Crows and swans are not birds of the same feather because of their different mental attitudes. The fruitive workers or passionate men are compared to the crows, whereas the all-perfect saintly persons are compared to the swans. The crows take pleasure in a place where garbage is thrown out, just as the passionate fruitive workers take pleasure in wine and women and places for gross sense pleasure. The swans do not take pleasure in the places where crows are assembled for conferences and meetings. They are instead seen in the atmosphere of natural scenic beauty, where there are transparent reservoirs of water nicely decorated with the stems of lotus flowers in variegated colors of natural beauty. That is the difference between
and it is not possible to bring them up into the same rank and file. Similarly, there are different kinds of literature for different types of men of different mentality. Mostly, the market literatures which attract men of the crows categories are literatures containing refused remnants of sensuous topics. They are generally known as mundane talks in relation with the gross body and subtle mind. They are full of subject matter described in decorative language, full of mundane similes and metaphorical arrangements. Yet, with all that, they do not glorify the Lord. Such poetry and prose on any subject matter is considered decoration of a dead body. Spiritually advanced men who are compared to the swans do not take pleasure in such dead literatures, which are sources of pleasure for men who are spiritually dead. These literatures in the modes of passion and ignorance are distributed under different labels, but they can hardly help the spiritual urge of human being, and thus swan-like spirituality advanced men have nothing to do with them. Such spirituality advanced men are called Manasa also because they always keep up the standard of transcendental voluntary service to the Lord on spiritual plane. This completely forbids fruitive activities for gross bodily sense satisfaction or subtle speculation of the material egoistic mind. Social literary men, scientists, mundane poets, theoretical philosophers, and politicians who are completely absorbed in the material advancement of sense pleasure are all dolls of the material energy. They take pleasure in a place where rejected subject matters are thrown. According to Swami Sridhara, this is the pleasure of the prostitute hunters. But literatures which describe the glories of the Lord are enjoyed by the Paramahamsas who have grasped the essence of human activities. Hare Krishna.
5.7 Tadvago visargo janatagya viplavo yasmin pratishlokam avaddavati api namani anantasya yasho nikittani yat shrunuvanti gayanti grananti sadava. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Yogesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creature full of transcendental words, directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this words misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. It is qualification of the purport. It is qualification of the great thinkers to pick up the best even from the worst. It is said that the intelligent man should pick up nectar from a stalk of poison, should accept gold even from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson even from a man, from a teacher who comes from the untouchables. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone in every place without exception. But a saint is far above the level of an ordinary man. He is always absorbed in glorifying the Supreme Lord because of broadcasting the holy name and fame of Supreme Lord. The polluted atmosphere of the world will change, and as a result of propagating the transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will be. Sorry, Prabhuji, the screen has gone.
Okay. While preparing this commentation,
I'm saying in their transactions, while preparing this commentation on this particular stanza of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have a crisis before us. Our neighboring friend China has attacked the border of India with a militaristic spirit. We have practically no business in the political field. Yet we see that previously there were both China and India, and they both lived peacefully for countries without ill feeling. The reason is that they lived those days in an atmosphere of God consciousness, and every country over the surface of the world was God-fearing, pure-hearted, and simple. And there was no question of political diplomacy. There is no cause of...
We'll get a chance to answer. Hare Krishna, Sri Gopal Bro.
There is no cause. Okay.
There is no cause.
Hare Prabhuji, just a second. There is no cause of quarrel between the two countries, China and India, over land, which is not very suitable for habitation. And certainly there is no cause for fighting on this issue. But due to the age of quarrel, Kali, which we have discussed, there is always a chance of quarrel on slight provocation. This is due not to the issue in question, but to the polluted atmosphere of this age. Systematically, there is propaganda by a section of people to stop glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, there is a great need for disseminating the message of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world, to do all the supermost good, as well as to bring out the desired peace in the world. Because India has failed in her duty by neglecting this responsible work, there is so much quarrel and trouble all over the world. We are confident that if the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam is received only by the leading men of the world, certainly there will be a change of heart, and naturally the people in general will follow them. The mass of people in general are tools in the hands of the modern politicians and leaders of the people. If there is a change in the heart of the leaders only, certainly there will be a radical change in the atmosphere of the world. We know that our honest attempt to present this great literature conveying transcendental message for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general and re-spiritualizing the world atmosphere is fraught with many difficulties. Our presenting this matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail, and there will be so many literary discrepancies despite our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with all our faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of society will still accept this due to its being an honest attempt to glorify the Almighty God. When there is fire in a house, the inmates of the house go out to help from the neighbors who may be foreigners, and yet without knowing the language, the victims of the fire express themselves and the neighbors understand the need, even though not expressed in the same language. The same spirit of cooperation is needed to broadcast this transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the polluted atmosphere of the world. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values, and thus we are concerned with the techniques and not with the language. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there will be success.
Shall I read, Prabhu?
Who is there?
Poonam.
Yes, please.
When there are too many materialistic activities by the people in general, all over the world, there is no wonder that a person or a nation attacks another person or nation on slight provocation. That is the rule of this age of Kali or quarrel. The atmosphere is already polluted with corruption of all description, and everyone knows it well. There are so many unwanted literatures full of materialistic ideas of sense gratification. In many countries, there are bodies appointed by the state to detect and censor obscene literature. This means that neither the government nor the responsible leaders of the public want such literature, yet it is in the marketplace because the people want it for sense gratification. The people in general want to read. That is a natural instinct. But because their minds are polluted, they want such literatures. Under the circumstances, transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam will not only diminish the activities of the corrupt mind of the people in general, but also it will supply food for their hankering after reading some interesting literature. In the beginning, they may not like it because one suffering from jaundice is reluctant to take sugar candy, but we should know that sugar candy is the only remedy for jaundice. Similarly, let there be systematic propaganda for popularizing reading of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, which will act like sugar candy for the jaundice-like condition of sense gratification. When men have a taste for this literature, the other literatures which are catering poison to society will then automatically cease. We are sure, therefore, that everyone in human society will welcome Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it is now presented with so many faults, for it is recommended by Sri Narada, who has very kindly appeared in this chapter. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. So, as we can see in this purpose, Vedas were also rejected because there is no proper glorification of Krishna. Similarly, other literatures where Krishna is not being glorified. Similarly, without discussing Krishna, there is no point in doing Ekadasi. Today's Ekadasi, we are discussing Krishna in your association. Thank you everyone for joining today. We'll meet again on Tuesday, same. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vacha kalpadara kripa sindhu eva cha pantana pavane vyo vaishnave vinod Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Bhagavatam ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai.